And as I'm saying, it's 2 o'clock. Let's head inside. 2 o'clock. Sorry, I had to do that. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the last session of our 10-year event. The first panel discussion is on the value of international collaboration. And on the panel, we have Dr. Preetha Rajaraman, Dr. Aravinda Mitra. I invite the panel members to come on the stage. Dr. Daniel Shah, Dr. Alka Sharma, and Dr. Lalita. The moderator for this session will be Dr. Simon Kay. Simon Kay is Head of International Operations and Partnerships at Wellcome. He leads the Wellcome Trust capacity building initiatives in Africa and Asia, including support for funding that Wellcome has established in Africa and, of course, IndiaAlliance. Before his international career with the British Council, he studied zoology, and he has a PhD in tumor immunology at the University of Nottingham. He regrets that his frequent travel takes him away from his fish, his cat, and his family, in that order. So, over to you, Simon.
Good. So, welcome, everybody. This is, I don't think that's on, is it? Can you hear me? Good. So this is that sort of part of the day. We're 3 days into the conference. It's that part of the meeting where everybody wants to go to sleep. So let me just start by asking you a question. Who here thinks international collaboration is a good thing? Put your hand up. Don't see everyone. Good. And who here thinks international collaboration is a bad thing? Right. So do we carry on, or do we need this panel? Yeah. Good, okay. So no, I'm going to try and keep you awake. And also to keep you awake, I'm going to pepper you with sort of questions, invite you to comment. In fact, I'm going to break with tradition already and see if there's one person from the audience here who would like to actually just tell me what you want to get out of this session. I don't almost care what it is, but one person from the audience, tell me what you want to get out of this session. Who's going to... Yes.
Proportionate distribution of research funds based on health needs across the globe.
Wow. Okay, so we bear that in mind. One of you is going to get that question towards the end, so you've got time to reflect on it. So just sort of a couple of thoughts before we start. And it's difficult to think about how do we frame a discussion on international collaboration. So I'm going to suggest, although I'll ask each of the panelists just to reflect on their own experience and their own role, and they'll tell us a bit about that. But I do think it's interesting to think about this both as individuals, as institutions, and at a national level. So I might prod a little bit with questions on your views on those themes, and perhaps sort of there'll be one or two little elephants in the room we might cover as well, which one or two of the panelists know is coming. So I think without further ado, and I don't think it matters really which order we go on, but I would ask Dr. Preetha Rajaraman from the US Embassy to say a few words, and perhaps start by telling us what you do here and a little bit about your background that got you here. Thank you.
Absolutely, thanks. So thanks, Simon, for that introduction. So here I represent basically the Office of the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, and the three agencies that most of you in this room know quite well probably are the National Institutes of Health, Centers for Disease Control, and Food and Drug Administration, all of who have an in-country presence. But I do also represent the other 11 agencies that are not here, but do sometimes have work here, such as our mental health agency, SAMHSA, and our human resources services agencies. In terms of my background, what got me here, so my background is in, my training is in cancer genetics and epidemiology. I was an intramural scientist at NIH for many years, and then moved on to manage the South Asia program for the NCI before taking on this current position, which is basically the entire health portfolio here in India.
Thank you. So just perhaps just say a few more words about, why the collaboration between the US and India is important, perhaps to you as an individual, and then reflecting perhaps why that's also important to the institution, the NIH, where you used to work.
Absolutely. So I'll start actually by flipping that order and saying, how can it not be important?
Yes.
So taking it sort of at the broadest level, how can the world achieve its sustainable development goals without our partnership with India? So if India doesn't achieve them, then the world will not achieve them. Diseases no longer, they've never known any boundaries. And so certainly, if you pick up a bug on a plane today, tomorrow it will be in another part of the world. And so really, sort of very broadly, we think that international collaboration is important. Why India? Well, first of all, so much of the disease burden on both ends of the spectrum, whether it's infectious diseases or more recently chronic diseases, are here in India. But apart from that sort of dire picture, more exciting for us is the fact that there really is huge potential here in India, both in terms of the caliber of the scientists, of the innovation landscape that is growing stronger and which Wellcome has and the IndiaAlliance have really helped to build. And in terms of, there are scientific questions, quite honestly, that are just better answered here in India than they are elsewhere, because the local pressure is just higher to find the answers to those questions. And so that's why, as an institution, we're here. Personally, why is it important to me? Well, obviously, my parents, my ancestors are from here in India, and so I am deeply personally connected to here. And so that's sort of the second angle to the question.
Good, that's nice. We'll come back to you, but thank you for that. So, Dr. Harinder Mitra, I'm just, as I said, when I read through your brief bio, I was so excited to see that you'd worked in the Antarctic. So I wonder if you perhaps I know it's not what we're here for, but I'm sure people would love to hear a little bit about your work in the Antarctic, and then maybe you can help us reflect on what's important to India in the way it collaborates with the world, and that's a big question.
Thank you, Simon, and good afternoon to all of you. Yeah, you remembered me of my days in Antarctica. Of course, I had more black hair then. But yes, Antarctic is a living example where without cooperation, nothing happens. And that is where I actually learned the trick of the trade. And ever since then, I have been involved in the international collaboration. So my association with this whole, milieu of international cooperation has been more than now 30 years almost, starting from Antarctica. And subsequently, having moved to the Department of Science and Technology as the head of international division, and of course the founding executive director of the binational Indo-US Science and Technology Forum, and in my current portfolio also as scientific secretary in the Office of Principal Scientific Advisor, I have a much larger portfolio in terms of where international collaboration is looked as an important tool today in this whole game plan as India stands today amongst the Committee of Nations. So yes, so that's what I said. Antarctica is a living example where one can see that science is global, even though technology may be local. But all of us know as scientists that science is global. And today the problems that we face, as Pritha said, they do not respect any geopolitical boundaries, whether it is water, you name it. I need not repeat it. No nation alone in the world can answer these questions, because the infrastructure is limited, the bandwidth is limited, and we are looking at time frames, which we can, if we work collectively, we'll be able to deliver it much, much more quickly. So I think, therefore, international collaboration is not a fashion. It used to be maybe 20 years back, but it is a necessity today. The more we collaborate, the more we cooperate, the more there is a chance that humankind is able to sustain. Because today, competition in this sphere is not really going to take us anywhere. So that's very critical.
Dr. Mitra, are you able to give us a little bit of insight into sort of where your government prioritizes? Are there particular subjects? Are there particular countries or parts of the world where you prioritize?
Well, the government doesn't prioritize by way of subjects or any part of the world, honestly speaking. But essentially, our entire global engagement is based on the fact that it should add value to the national programs. That's very, very critical. Now, if you talk to me about international collaboration 15 years ago, 20 years ago, or when I started my career as a researcher, it was very, very reactive. Somebody comes and say, oh, would you like to work with this? I'm bringing in so much of fund, and these are what we want to do. India would jump in. But now that entire involvement of India in the international collaboration is very, very proactive. Certainly when I said proactive, these have to be aligned with some of the national missions that we are doing. But at the same time, it also looks into the larger spectrum of human capacity building, which is very, very important, irrespective of the area. But one new element that has now been added in the whole paradigm of international collaboration, which was not there in the past, is this whole aspect of innovation and entrepreneurship. And as all the world realizes, and most of us as scientists have to answer, that how is science going to benefit society, how is science going to touch the lives of people, how is science going to contribute to the economy of the country and to the knowledge economy of the 21st century, so to speak. So this paradigm of innovation and industrial R&D is become a new element now in this. So much of our focus also has been, including with all the countries, UK, US, and so many of them, is engaging in a new element of innovation and industrial R&D that could lead into product development that can go to the market space,
so
which is a new thing, which was not there in the past.
And for that, of course, you have BIRAC and your collaboration with the Gates Foundation.
That's right. We have several mechanisms, BIRAC of DBT, and we have the Global Innovation Technology Alliance, which is a unique platform that has been created between DST and CII, where 7 countries are partner countries. And the models are very, very simple. A project, 25% of the cost of the project comes from the government, 25% from the partnering industry is reflected on the other side as well. And using that model in 2 years' time frame, we are actually delivering products that can go to the market.
Good. So just to interrupt, audience, you've got a member of your government here who's well warmed up now. Anyone got a question at this point? I'm sort of breaking a little bit with tradition. Does anybody want to ask him a question? Mike Turner, I thought you wouldn't remain quiet for long.
Not an Indian national, but we'll gloss over that detail. I'm curious, you came up with the phrase, international action should add value to a national program. I understand entirely where that's coming from.
Mike, we don't hear you very well, so let's just make...
You'd used the phrase that an international activity should add value to a national program. To what extent do you think you should also flip that around? And there's some measure of moral obligation as a member of the G20, a very major player in the world, that you actually have national programs that should reflect an international agenda.
Yeah.
There's a gentle challenge.
Yeah, well, when I say so, if you look at the national programs now of any country, they're pretty much international in nature. I mean, as I said, all these challenges are so global, you really cannot, I have been interacting with 44 countries, in my capacity of head international. It's so similar. I mean, the areas are so, that's what I used to say that, and the large number of problems, the uniqueness of India, Prita talked about, we have all the problems in the world that you can think of. So whether I'm talking to South Africa or whether I'm talking to Japan or to UK or to US, there is some common element that will always come out. So that really made life easy for me to actually engage in international collaboration. So obviously, as I told you, the national programs do remain important, but we have such a wide bandwidth of national programs itself. Of course, there are certain priorities, but these priorities are pretty much global in nature these days. Whether it's energy, food, water, you name it, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, so.
We have so many questions for you. Let's move. I want to pass the microphone down to Lalita and put you on the spot. And if you say a few words about yourself, and you're at the moment managing a program between India and Germany.
Yes. I come from an organization, Indo-German Science and Technology Center, which is set up few years back, 7 to 8 years back, between DST, Government of India, and BMBF, Germany. The purpose of this organization was to promote application-oriented projects with a view to get societal benefits. So Germany being very advanced in technical technologies, and India having a lot of opportunities and manpower and intellectuals, young intellectuals, the governments thought it would be a very good opportunity to bring these two countries together and put up money so that it will come out in terms of some results for the benefit of society. So having said this, I have the privilege to be the second staff in Indo-German Science and Technology Center, now heading the scientific team, and with generous support from DST, my boss, Dr. Arvind Mitra, and German. And we are now in the second stage of growth. When I say that, it means when the center was set up, both the governments agreed to contribute 2 million euros per year for 5 years. And in 2017, it is, in fact, 2014, it is doubled. The contribution doubled to 4 million euro, and the center is, it is extended up to 2022 with a condition that if there is no disagreement between both the countries, it will extend up to 27, and then they will take a view. So
Lalita,
we started with...
May I just interrupt you for a second? So a lot of our discussion, obviously, the last 3 days has been about the biosciences, but I'm guessing that you're covering a much broader area. And I wonder if you could just help reflect, actually, in which other subjects or sectors that you find there's the most demand or the most successful collaboration?
We do not have specific thematic areas in the overview, but every year we do have specific thematic areas for the current call. So we do have 2+2 project program. That means it is with an industry support from India and Germany with academic. That means basic, there should be a scientific content plus it should be it will bring to some application oriented result. So in only one of the calls we had biotechnology, life science as the thematic area, but we had 4 projects, and 3 were in plant sciences. After that, we couldn't consider it as the most urgent, because biotechnology, life science is supported mainly heavily by DBT. Then in 2014, we had a call in medical technology, where India is lagging far behind, whereas Germany has shown its presence in the international market. And other than that, we couldn't advertise a call for biotechnology yet. So mostly it is advanced manufacturing, then environmental technologies, water, pollution related, etc. So now we have some more newer programs. That is, we realize that it is difficult to bring this people, industry, institute from both the countries together in one day. So to support that, we thought it is better to create platforms where IGSTC can put in some money for organizing bilateral workshops, where these people will meet, technologists, scientists, etc. And they will discuss on some ideas which may help both the countries to develop into successful projects. And then following to that, we advertise 2+2 grant calls in the similar thematic area. So that has been shown some success, and we are getting more and more projects, project applications as time passed. And we are hopeful that some of the projects have reached to the level that they can, they could produce some prototypes and it may move further. So that is the stage where we are, and now IGSTC is planning for setting R&D network centers with a view to support mobility, so that for collaborations, to creating collaborations between both the countries, between different institutes or industries, IGSTC will support the travel cost because those will be some huge programs which IGSTC may not be able to support in infrastructure or in manpower or other costs, but travel cost IGSTC can support. We hope in the coming days this bilateral program, at least with Germany, it will flourish much more.
Does anybody have a question for Lalita, just on India-Germany collaboration? No? Is it back, someone? Yeah.
Yeah, so, sorry, I'm just answering it, having handled the German program. We have collaboration with almost 7 German entities, right from DFG to DART to, to Helmholtz, to Humboldt, to PMBF. So different strands of cooperation have different mechanisms. When you say organic, I'm not very clear, but essentially some of the calls, like the DAT calls, are open across. It is not area specific, but the challenge that happens is when we do a call with Germany, if we do it all across the, without defining the areas, we are, flooded with so many applications, it becomes very difficult then to sort of choose and pick the best one. So strategically, we have therefore taken decisions that with some of the agencies, it would be focused calls. The Indo-German Center calls are focused, that is the reason, but as I told you, with the calls that we do with DART, they are just all across, it is not focused to any particular area.
But every call is defined.
The call with DART doesn't have any area, so anybody can apply to that. Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to just tell you, Germany, in terms of the impact factor of papers that India publishes in collaboration with Germany is the highest. And when you say what is the value of international collaboration, I want to figuratively mention that whereas the national average impact factor is 3.7, the papers that we do through international collaborations have an average impact factor of 5.7. And with Germany, it is the highest, it is 7.4. So our German collaboration is perhaps one of the oldest, much, in fact, precedes our US and UK formal collaborations, I would say.
Interesting. Thank you. So, Dr. Alka Sharma from DBT, would you just say a few words to introduce yourself? I know you were active at Valor some years ago, and now you have a more general responsibility at the DBT, so perhaps you can reflect a little bit on your own role, and then the importance that DBT attaches to international collaboration.
Thanks, Simon. Good afternoon, everyone. As we all know, collaboration is the key to connect the right kind of people to get the desired goals. So collaboration is really important to bring the right kind of people on the same platform to work together towards the common goal. So both national and international collaboration is essential because through these collaborations, because we all know that science has no boundaries. So linkages with experts across the globe and also involvement of stakeholders from wider society research network is essential to identify important key research questions with their solutions. So realizing the importance of international collaboration, the Department of Biotechnology is promoting international collaboration since its inception. And currently we have established collaborations with almost all major countries in the world. And fostering global alliances is one of the key components in the National Biotechnology Strategy document. And this strategy has been formulated by DBT in consultation with clinicians, researchers, leaders of industry, NGO, policymakers, regulators, and this has been approved by the government. And this has a major emphasis on international collaboration. This includes bilateral and multilateral collaborative R&D programs, collaboration with non-government organizations, foundation, and also emphasis has been given on human resource development. We also have membership with professional bodies like AMBO for strengthening scientific interaction and collaborative research. And India is one of the member states of Human Frontier Science Program Organization, and where the collaboration is between India and Europe. Currently, we have ongoing collaboration with Novel Media to organize Novel Prize Series for 5 years in India. So, in nutshell, the DBT has given emphasis to international collaboration right from the beginning. Now we are also coming forward to enhance that collaboration to the next level. And here I would like to give some examples. For example, Vaccine Action Program is the oldest collaboration in DBT for almost now about 30 years between DBT and NIH. And under this program, an indigenous vaccine has been developed from end-to-end process through under WAP, that is rotavirus. The other vaccine projects are at different stages of development. Now DBT has gone ahead and working with global CEPI to work and develop the India-specific component of CEPI, that is we call NCEPI, and there the focus is on diseases with epidemic potential. Similarly, we have 10 years back, we started a biodesign program with Stanford University, where the aim was to create a pool of medical innovators and entrepreneurs. And initially, we used to send our fellows there to learn the biodesign process. And after a few years now, the fellows from Australia, Japan are coming to join hands with Indian team here to develop technologies and commercialization, and it's an end-to-end biodesign process. And following this process, the outcome is very encouraging. More than 100 innovators have been trained in medical technology innovation, and now we are going ahead with other countries to expand this program further. Similarly, there are many other mission programs. One I would like to highlight that DBT is a founder member of Mission Innovation of Global Clean Energy Innovation, where this is a global initiative of 23 countries and European Union. And this is something that where their 8 projects are now ongoing projects under this initiative, and DBT is participating in all the 8 projects in Global Clean Energy Innovation Mission Program. Similarly, there are AMR program with UK, and then now we are now in the process of formalizing this to become a member of Global AMR R&D Hub. And we are also now initiating dialogues with a SHARC country for multilateral collaborative research programs. And the BIREC has been set up by DBT as the public sector undertaking, and BIREC, many of the programs where we are now involving industry that we are being implemented through BIREC, and these are now resulting very encouraging results in terms of capacity building, collaborating R&D, technology developments, and also validation, evaluation, testing, and so on.
That's why you're all so busy. I wonder if either yourself or Arabinda just might reflect on what the biosciences learns from the physical and chemical sciences. I read a little, and I think those are actually, although, for me, my whole world here is actually sort of biosciences and population health. But you have huge collaborations, I think, in the physical sciences and chemical sciences. Do you share experience, and what can the biosciences learn from the other sciences?
Well, basically, the models that we have used could be replicated, also in biosciences. But yeah, there are certain subjects which require compulsorily, international collaborations, like, astronomy, or particle physics, high energy physics, where, you have these mega science projects, so to speak, where India is, member of, like, the CERN, recently the LIGO, the 30-meter telescope, the Square Kilometer Array, and so many of them. Of course, so the models that we have used, could be very well used in the biosciences. And one of the very successful models that I have been able to see happen is the virtual network centers that we started with the United States through the Indo-US Forum, where what we simply do is the best and the brightest groups in the two countries, which are already endowed and have been nationally funded, we simply provide enough glue to them so that they can interact through an exchange process. The PIs, their students, working in similar areas in two different countries between the US and India. But they are, mind you, the most important thing here is today science is multidisciplinary and multi-institutional. So more that we work across institutions will be more effective. So when I talk of virtual network center, we had a model which we said minimum 2+2, where there needs to be 2 institutions and from 2 different disciplines, right? So that's how you can connect a biologist with a physicist, or a biologist with a data scientist, or a biologist with even a chemist. So these are virtual network centers which are very interdisciplinary in nature. And what you really do is provide enough money, their resources, for people to move back and forth so that they can work together and leverage what I say the collaborative advantage in terms of leverage their own expertise and leverage their complementary strengths to address a particular problem. So this model is a very nimble and a very low-cost model, but at the same time, you're able to connect the best and brightest across countries through this model. And this has been replicated, I think, in the Indo-US Forum, if I remember now correctly, more than 40 such virtual network centers were done. Each of them had a 2 or 3 years lifespan, and many of them were in the biological sciences as well. So I think this is a model that could be easily emulated to connect people across the groups.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is anybody bursting with a comment or a question or?
I'm Professor Abha Singh, Director of Research Psychology, MIT University, Noida. I have a very pertinent question, and I'm glad, sir, you used multidisciplinary. Depression is going to be the next worldwide problem, and India would be leading in this. So as a psychologist, I have a lot of concern. We do a lot of things on this preventive mental health for young generation today. Depression, we know that there is a chemical imbalance in mind. And since it's a biotechnology, I think, group, I'm raising a point. We need to have a joint collaboration and multidisciplinary approach to treat this mind. And today, even medical science is talking about holistic treatment. Do we have some kind of, again, hope and scope for this area, psychological science, for the treatment and cure and prevention? Prevention is more important. Even WHO is focusing now on that. So I would like your direction and comment on this.
Does anybody want to take that? Yeah.
Very important question, because this we have a neuroscience division in our Department of Biotechnology. But here I would like to, because that Indo-Japan program we are doing in DBT, and where NIMHANS is the major partner in this program. There are 5 institutions, but since your question is related to neuro, so I will just focus on NIMHANS component. So there are 6 cohort studies have been planned and then already implemented, and this is one of them. So what they are doing, they are having genetic information for the 3-4 families, pedigree chart they have, and they are trying to figure out about what exactly is the cause for these kind of diseases, and they have a cohort studies and then 20 years follow-up. It's a first of its kind study in the world. No one has designed this study for 20 years follow-up, but it's a long time, but in, maybe well before that, they will be able to find out some reason for this, and based on the pedigree and also the scientists and clinicians, they are working together to find out the reason and also how this can be cured. And apart from this, there are many other R&D programs, but since we are discussing international collaboration, this is a major international collaboration in this area with Japan, because there is a, why it is Japan, because there we have a collaboration on IPS systems, Kyoto University with the Yamanaka's group. Their collaboration is with for capacity building, providing training to our researchers, young researchers on IPS, disease-specific IPS cells. And they later on, they are having a biorepository of that, and later on they will connect this with the using how IPS cells can be used and for application purpose.
Good. I'll just invite Mike, my colleague Mike Turner. Mike, just say just a couple of words about how important mental health is also now to welcome. If you've got a microphone, and then we'll go on to another subject. Oh, I'm sorry, we'll come back to you then. Yeah. Okay, yes, I will, don't worry, I won't forget Dan. I'm saving the best for last. Yeah.
Completely agree about the importance of mental health. Welcome has a special initiative that it is launching quite soon on mental health. It will not be all mental health, but it will focus on mental health in young adults and teenagers, particularly on anxiety and depression. So completely agree with this is a global priority that's looming on us very, very fast indeed. Yeah. So watch the website. We're looking for a director at the moment. That wasn't a hint, unless you wish to take it as a hint.
Good. Thanks, Mike. I hope that partially answered your question.
Yes, I'm just going to very quickly jump on that and say that mental health is actually one of the US-India priorities for collaboration as well. And in fact, our National Institute of Mental Health does already have a significant amount of funding in India, but is actually looking to expand. And in fact, is going to, the director of that institute and several of the leadership are going to be here in India next week, really to look at ways to expand the work that's already happening here.
Great, thanks. So I don't know if it's fair to say I've left the best for last, but Dr. Daniel Shah, I've got three things, and I'm not even going to do the scary question yet. But I think the first question is, what on earth is a philosopher doing leading the UK research and innovation effort in India? What is UKRI? And just a little bit about UK priorities. Thank you.
Thanks, Arvind. Thanks, Simon. So I guess this is part of your sort of individual, institutional, national question. So I'm the Director of UK Research and Innovation. UKRI is yet another four-letter acronym from the UK, but it's a new organisation with a distinguished pedigree. So actually it's the new organisation that we've created by bringing together the UK's 7 research councils, our innovation agency, Innovate UK, and a new body called Research England that funds university research and knowledge exchange in England to create this one larger, strong, coherent research and innovation funding body. And India is very definitely a priority for us. We have offices like the one that I lead only in a small number of capital cities. We have one in Brussels, we have one in DC, Beijing, and I've been very lucky and have gained a lot of weight by being the head of the India office. How did I personally get involved in this? Well, we're a multidisciplinary research funder, so actually we care about all of the disciplines, and I think I can say something from an institutional perspective about that. But I think that internationalization actually has an inherent value, and that's my personal view. And when I studied overseas as well as in the UK. And I have a personal connection, similarly to India in my family background, because actually my dad came from India to study in the UK. But it's not unusual, I think, to move internationally to learn more. And I think that has a distinguished pedigree. Thousands of scholars were coming from across Asia to North India 2,000 years ago. And Erasmus himself was traveling around Europe, spent time in Cambridge as much as he did in the Netherlands. I think what has changed is the scale and the prevalence and the nature of that internationalization. So now for us in the UK, more than half of our academic outputs are with an international collaborator. The average UK university's research output is more international than the leading edge universities of the 80s were in terms of their publication profiles. And from an institutional perspective, as a funder, our responsibility ultimately is to use public money from taxpayers in the best way that we can. And that's to get the maximum excellence and impact. And we mean that in a very wide sense, in the sense of pushing the frontiers of human understanding and in the sense of delivering economic, social, and cultural goods, both for ourselves and for other people. And internationalization increases both of those. In terms of field-weighted citation impact, which takes all of the disciplines and normalizes them due to the fact that philosophers don't get cited as highly as biomedical researchers do. If the global average is 1, the global average for a high-performing research nation like the UK is higher, but the global average for international collaboration is higher still, is 1.5. So you get a 50% bonus as a proxy for quality for collaborating internationally. DST's figures show the UK-India collaboration is more than 2.5. The UKRI-India collaborations that we've been able to measure are more than 5 times. So we're getting a lot more out of that public resource by collaborating internationally. And some of that is not reflected in the numbers. I think there are things that you can do internationally that you can't do on your own. And I think Arvinder actually mentioned this, but you can build teams of talent that no one country, no matter how vast, could supply. You can work at scale. You can bring together pre-existing investments from many parties to let you do stuff at speed. And you can pool risk in terms of big infrastructures like CERN, like the Square Kilometre Array, that we're both partners in. And you can also have diversity of talents. And I think that inherently helps you learn and to move more quickly. So we're making big changes for ourselves, in part, in order to be an attractive partner internationally. So we are bringing all of our research councils and our innovation agency together to be one new organization. We're making the largest investment that we've made in research and innovation for certainly my lifetime. And for our international priorities, in general, I think I won't list all the challenges because they've already been listed, but actually there are some about how we work that I think are priorities for us. So one is I think that we want to work across disciplines. And we've changed ourselves in order to do that better because we think that science is changing and society is changing. We are increasingly trying to bring business-led innovation and research together, and I think that's mirrored in the conversations that we've been having for many years with our Indian partners, but also infrastructure and people, because those big pieces of infrastructure, and that includes data sets as well as kit, are training grounds for the next generation of talent, but they also only work if they've got the talented people to harness the data. We're increasingly focusing on global challenges, and I think that, again, is not unique to us. You see that in many countries' ways of structuring their collaborations, although we use different languages. And those challenges are both, the cutting-edge industries of the future in quantum or in AI or in the future of mobility, electric vehicles, addressing the problems of aging, but also the global challenges that we all share. For example, about how do we answer the question that Vijay Raghavan asked a couple of weeks ago. How do we have growth without exploitation, without exploiting people in other countries, people in our own countries, or the planet in a way that isn't sustainable for all of us? And I think we want to be open. Open in the sense we've taken a lot of work, including with the Wellcome Trust going back many years, on open access, but also open to collaboration. So we, I think, are justly proud of our relationship with India, but we have a huge collaboration with the US, and I have colleagues sitting in DC, and the German-UK collaboration is strong, and all 4 of us have people working together on joint programs around the world. So none of this is either or, it's all yes and.
So Dan, thanks, that's really helpful. So I think so far in this discussion, we've actually now only got 15 minutes to go. I'll come back to it in a minute, that we're pretty much agreed on everything. Now, collaboration depends on the movement of people. Now, I think there's an elephant in the room called Brexit, and because I don't work for the government, I can mention it. And I work for an organization where our director and our policy team have made it very clear that wherever one stands on Brexit, what we do passionately care about is that people can continue to move, and that their families can move with them. So it's so dependent on mobility. And I'd welcome either a comment from the audience or from any of the panel here, actually on what governments can do, and it's not just about the UK, there's other governments as well, what we can do to actually facilitate the movement of people. Yeah, please, yeah.
Venkat Narayan from Emory University, and I speak from 12 years of experience with the joys of collaboration and some of the despair with collaboration. So we talk of collaboration as it's beautiful, and I think it is. So let's take for a simple example of a US-India collaboration. Number one, it starts with the 2 organizations or 2 countries coming to an agreement on an announcement. And then there are different peer review standards on both sides, so that's ICMR and NIH. And then there is a process of getting through HMSC, Health Ministry clearance in India. And then the reporting requirements on both sides are different. And then simultaneously you have an Indo-German call on the same thing, and crowded as the investigator capacity is in India, the same investigators go after that too. So my question here is, what do we need to do next to make the framework of collaboration easier, more efficient, more impactful, and reduce the administrative burdens on investigators and on the systems. Like, for example, can there be collaboration across the different countries that are working together? Can there be collaborations across Indian agencies? Like ICMR has certain rules, DBT has certain rules, DST has other rules, US-India engagement has some rules, US-German engagement has some rules. How do we make a more common set of criteria based on the best standards, giving up some national sovereignty, but achieving greater international good? How can that be done?
Do you want to take that, please? Thank you.
Well, that's a very tough question to answer, but as a guy who's been practicing international collaboration, I feel in order to collaborate, you need two hands to clap. So no collaboration can happen unless we compromise on certain things. You cannot be stringent on following what your national rules are when you are doing an international collaboration. So that amount of flexibility has to be there in order to have international collaboration going. But there are always certain boundary conditions which all nations have to follow, same as also organizations or agencies have to follow. But notwithstanding that, as I said, our engagements have been prolific. Almost all agencies that you talk about in the world, we are engaged with, and these have happened in a very short span of time. So there are constraints. I agree. The processes are different. Many times what happens, the start date of a project will vary by 6 months in each other's countries because there are different processes that needs to be followed, clearances are to be followed. Notwithstanding that, the international collaborations have been significant. Last 15, 20 years, our investments in that have also gone across, not only in DST-DBT, but across so many other ministries, scientific ministries of the government. So I think, it is a give and take process. Where you have to come to a common ground to collaborate, and some things you compromise, some things you have to agree, and that's how collaborations take place. So, and each country has its own way of doing things. What we do with Japan is not true what we do with our neighboring country Bangladesh, because they're also at a different stage of growth. So, and it also depends upon the stage of growth of a country and its advancement, its resources. Everything matters. So you have to tune that, according to the country or the agency that you're working.
Yeah. I'm going to pass to Dan, who I think is going to respond to but thanks very much, and thanks for the question.
Thank you. It's a really good question, and actually, I'll try and answer your question, Simon, but I think the end of my answer may connect back to your answer. So, firstly, I think you're absolutely right about the movement of people, but I would stress the movement. So we did some really interesting research in the UK, and we discovered that we are net break even on researchers. Pretty much as many join as leave, but the most productive people were the people who were mobile. Whether it was people who came to the UK for a brief period of time and then moved on back to their home country or to a third country, or whether it was Brits who left and spent some time working overseas and came back. And that was productive in terms of publications and in terms of proxies for publication quality. So I do think it's about movement. It's not about brain gain. It's about circulation. In terms of the specifics, I think we're now offering more visas as the UK to India than any other country. Certainly, we're continuing to make changes. A number of the Newton Bubba fellowships by other funders like the Royal Society have been eligible for Tier 1 exceptional talent visas, and I know that there's been an increase in new forms, for example, entrepreneurship visas. UKRI has just become a Tier 5 sponsor for government-sponsored exchange schemes. But we have investments in talent that are open rather than specifically about particular parts of the world. So we have a new, almost £1 billion investment in future leaders in both research and innovation, and it's open. It's not targeting people anywhere, it's just open to the best talent from anywhere in the world, whether that's from India or the US or Germany or from Bangladesh. And to answer the Brexit question, I think there's a very boring thing I can say, which is the UK Cabinet is meeting at 2 o'clock this afternoon UK time. That's going to be well after we've left the panel, so I won't be able to say any more about their discussions. But I can say some very practical things, I think, about the framework programs. And I do think it's these programs which sometimes create administration, but sometimes at least create common administration between partners. So for the current framework program, the UK remains a member state. We remain eligible, including with Indian partners, under, for example, DBT and DST co-funded calls to lead and to participate with Indian partners. And although we're not expecting it to happen, if anything goes wrong, the UK government would underwrite the cost of the UK participation in those grants up until the end of the programme. I think we all as research communities feel that we'll benefit from continuing to collaborate very closely in global endeavours. I think that we are a top 5 collaborator for every other country in Europe, and they are among many of our most important collaborators. There is a cliche on every negotiation in Europe that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. So we won't know for certain until everything else that's above my pay grade has been done about the future programme. But I do think there's a more general point about the collaborations not being zero-sum, and that they continue to evolve and to grow. So the discussions about the next framework programme are already about it being more international, and in particular, we've got examples where we've built on past European work with India to now do Europe-India collaborations with multiple countries, led by the UK research councils in Europe, but bringing in Switzerland, Norway, Slovenia, Poland, Italy, collaborating with India. And those are models that can continue to run whatever happens. And they are one of the ways of working together to address global challenges, where we're all going to go through the same peer review process. And there'll be another meeting next week for a collaboration between DBT for India, Japan, China, Sweden, and the UK in London on addressing sustainable development.
Okay. It's a brave British civil servant who speaks about Brexit without hesitation. Thank you. We're going to run out of time soon, so I'd like to take these perhaps as just brief comments. So first you and then you. Thank you.
I agree completely with Venkat in terms of international collaborations. I would say that the obstacles he's talking about, they put investigators in a position where such engagements are not for the faint-hearted.
Right.
And I don't say this lightly.
Yeah.
So what I see happening over and over again is certain pockets of investigators develop very deep collaborations, and others never enter the fray because negativity surrounds those international collaborations. But then talking about this movement thing, I think one of the frustrations that I see is that there is no dearth of fellowships within India where it is funded very heavily at the PhD student level and the postdoc level.
Yeah.
But when it comes to movement, there is no dearth of fellowships from 2 months to 3 months to 6 months. And I think in biomedical research, it is not enough time. What I would say is, and something that the India Alliance does well, is I think they have 12 to 18-month time period to go away. We should allow for more fellowships for longer duration of training, and many more of these people will come back with much more solid training, and all of those alliances are building up on those high-quality publications which come automatically.
Thank you. Over here.
So, we've heard the call. We want to internationalize, and in our institutions, we've done that. We do international collaborations, we bring in international students, we even hire international faculty. But at every stage, the Indian government or the administrative apparatus does its best to discourage or even intimidate, in some cases, international researchers from coming to India through the visa application system and all the follow-ups that they have to do annually, repeatedly, year after year after year. All this is just talk unless those kinds of things on the ground change. The money is not going to change it.
Thank you. Does anyone want to make a quick response to that? Or?
So in fact, that was going to be one of my last points when you'd said think about things that we should think about going forward. But certainly, this is a very complex environment in many ways, and the regulations are no exception. And I think that is actually one of the beauties that an organization like India Alliance can bring, right? Because you do have a little bit of flexibility, and retaining that is so important. And seeing if we can nucleate more structures like that, where you can sort of gather the different changing regulations, climate, etc., and be almost a one-stop shop for anyone who wants to come in to India. And it's wonderful that you have this now between UK and India, but really broaden that to other countries as well. And I think that would be tremendously valuable.
I was going to finish this panel because I'm being reminded now we're nearly out of time, where's Shahid Jamil, the Executive Director of the India-Alliance? He's hiding somewhere. Yeah. So I want you to advise Dr. Jamil, what is just perhaps one piece of advice that you would give to the India-Alliance and actually the very practical and pragmatic role they can play in sort of fostering international collaboration? I think you may have just done that. You perhaps have already answered the question. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so that was certainly part of it, is see yourself as certainly broadening your number of collaborations, but also being that first stop for anybody who wants to enter India in terms of help interpret the landscape here and start and mentor collaborations all the way through. But the second part is maintain your dedication to very high quality science. And I know that this was something you grappled with early on in terms of inclusiveness versus excellence. And I'm really, really pleased that you've decided on excellence. But what you also bring, of course, is the local context, which the rest of us internationally can only get a glimpse of, and on the ground with all of your scientists here. And so please do continue to bring that focus into any of these discussions globally.
Good, thanks. So should we just pass that? Yes, 3 words.
That's excellence, relevance, and impact. This has to be the driving force, because unless it makes impact of high impact, which is very good, but how is it going to impact the society, the people, has to be also kept in mind.
I'm sure if we had another hour, the scientists might push back to you on that. But anyway, let's move on. Dan, any last words? Your advice to Dr. Shahid Jamil?
I would welcome his advice as well, but I guess my advice would be to keep exploiting the privilege you have in this wonderful institution and your comparative autonomy to keep changing and pushing the envelope. And if there are 2 things that you're already doing that I think it would be interesting to see how you could take further, one would be reaching out geographically in terms of the work you're doing with Africa, for example, and thinking globally. The other would be reaching out in terms of society. I think in terms of solving global problems, India is indispensable because of its reservoir of talent, amongst other things. But also there are many sections of talent that are underused across other sections of society. So the more you can reach out, because talent is randomly distributed and wealth is not, and the more you can engage the public and help them to understand the value of what you do, the better.
Thank you. Dr.
So as we all agree that international collaboration is imperative for fostering expansion of knowledge for the betterment of the society. So my advice is we need to work collectively. That government is already doing it, but there is need to put more efforts and need to work collectively for streamlining the processes which are involved during approval of the proposals.
Thank you. Lalita.
Our experience is that when the project tenure is there, there is good collaboration. Once the project is over, yes, they don't know each other. So my suggestion would be continue to have the same collaboration going on, probably without much spending, much expenditure you can do in the era of video chatting or conference call, etc. To continue with the idea, you do not need much money, much funds, but continue to try to get funds so that you can continue with more stronger collaborations. But please don't forget the collaborations once your project tenure is over.
Thank you. So I think we're 1 minute over, so we'll stop this. I'd like to really sort of thank all of the panel for their sort of very rich contributions. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon, and all the panel members for the lively discussion. We will now move to the next session, which is a panel discussion on funding science and innovation in India. Invite the panel members to come onto the stage. Professor Shankar Subramaniam, Dr. Shirshendu Mukherjee, Dr. Rajesh Gokhale, Mr. Manoj Kumar, and Dr. Harish Iyer. The moderator of this session is Dr. Tasleem Arif Syed. Dr. Syed is the Director and CEO for Cellular and Molecular Platforms, more popularly known as CCAMP. This aims to foster research and innovation in life science, Dr. Syed has a PhD in neuroscience from the Max Planck Institute and a postdoc from the University of California, San Francisco. He also has management training from the University of California, Berkeley and the University of California, Santa Cruz. Dr. Syed has served as a management consultant with many biotech firms in the US.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think the organizers, first of all, many congratulations on the 10th anniversary. I think organizers have kept the best for the last. That is funding, and funding, that too, effective funding can pave the way for phenomenal change, as we all know. The aspect is that today we have absolutely amazing lineup of experts who are with us here, who actually can, talk about different aspects in terms of funding. But I think, as I would keep repeating myself so that the tone doesn't go in terms of funding, but impact funding, strategic funding, which people talk about from the perspective of business, but I think very thought-through funding, and how different perspectives come from the experts which are here. Who are here, and we have Shankar from UCSD. Welcome, Shankar. We have Dr. Shishindra Mukherjee from BIRAC PMU. Welcome, Trust Gates Foundation DBT thing. We have Rajesh from NII, who has donned several hats, including something that we want to catch up on today on the academic entrepreneurship. We have Manoj, who leads Social Alpha, an initiative of Tata Trust for social impact. He is advisor at Tata Trust. And then we have Harish, who is leading efforts for Gates Foundation, but before in previous avatar has done phenomenal work in industry as well. What we want to do possibly is not necessarily, or attempt to possibly put together some thoughts from these experts and keep a lot of time for possible discussion, which can be a free flow discussion. But as one says, I think one thing that we would like to possibly avoid is that not possibly go and why there is no funding per se to begin with. I think the idea is that how are we building futuristically the solutions for funding, which are impact funding for high-end mission mode funding and so on and so forth. So to begin with, I think if I may request all my colleagues here to introduce themselves and introduce their work. So I think we can actually set the tone in terms of how your role has been from a global perspective at UCSD when I met you a year and a half ago. And otherwise, Shankar, if you can begin in that, and then I go to Shishendu and other panelists, if you can share your thoughts. I think all the mics are there somehow.
Thank you so much, Taslim. I got to start by telling you that I've been involved with Indian funding for the last 2 decades. I've been on SACO since I believe it's 1999 when I came first for the SACO meeting, or 98. And then I've been with the Wellcome Trust India Alliance for the last 10 years. So I've seen the growth of funding in science in India quite substantially in various ways. In fact, many of you know this, that where the institutions that DBT funded and started, including the Neuro Institute, one in the Cell Science Institute, in STEM and so on and so forth, have come during these years of investment in new institutions in India, and they have paid off in a big way. And in the last 10 years, they've been involved with the Wellcome Trust India Alliance. Investment and funding, it's been really absolutely substantial in terms of how India has invested in a focused and strategic manner towards enhancing good science in India. Before I just turn it back, I just want to add that I'm quite heavily involved in funding scenarios in the US. Scientists play a significant role in institutions like NIH in terms of deciding what areas are going to be funded in the future.
Correct.
I see less of that in India, where there is some engagement, but in NIH, if you want to start a new initiative, the institutions like, for example, Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, or the Institute for Diabetes, Digestive Diseases, they call for scientists across the country to come and write a white paper in terms of where things have to go. In fact, I was involved in writing 2 white papers that led to, billions of dollars, $2 billion of funding for the BIST initiative that I authored, and then we have the pharmacogenomics initiative, which is again substantially provided, $2 to $3 billion funding. So the engagement of people in science in terms of bringing funding is very important, and I would like to emphasize that as a potential opportunity for Indian scientists to think about where they want to go. But I'll come back to answering questions. This is more to introduce what I do in terms of science.
Absolutely, thank you. Before we go to Shendu, I think I'll come back on your point in terms of how scientists possibly, if I may use the word, advocate or lobby in terms of the focused funding and approach and efforts in terms of particular aspects, which has become a larger challenge, and how it built. Possibly you gave an example of NIH, but how it can be done, and we'll talk about it as well as go back. Thank you. Shenduji.
Thanks, Taslim. I think firstly I should congratulate the Alliance for completing a decade, 10 years of it, and Shahid sir for the invitation today to be in the panel. I think I could represent a unique system of funding mechanism called the Program Management Unit, which is based out of BIRAC, and it has jointly supported by the Gates Foundation, the Department of Biotechnology, the Wellcome Trust, and the USAID. They jointly support this unit, and our main aim is to run the Grand Challenges Exploration, the Grand Challenges main program, and some of the dedicated programs by the Wellcome Trust and the Gates Foundation, which are the program. The idea is not only to fund. I think what Dr. Farrar said on the inaugural day, nobody can talk about global health if we exclude India. I think that is a very bold statement he made, that science has to come out from India. We need to find solutions. So the idea of creating this PMU was to farm innovations. Our exploratory calls we run, the grand challenges we run, really farm innovations. And then we hunt good innovations out of them to take them to the next level. That is the idea. We farm and then hunt good innovations. That is what the Program Management Unit of BIRAC is. Not only a funding mechanism, but the DBT has, with the visionary leadership of Dr. Bhan, Dr. Vijay Raghavan, and Dr. Sarup right now, have created and supported this to really farm innovation, then pluck good innovations to take it to, and supplement them to the next. Funding is not only the part of innovation. It is one part of the innovation which really de-risks and take it. Sure. But how to write grant applications, how to design a problem, how to understand the regulatory strategy, how to understand the IP strategy. If the innovation cost is a level, what is your exit strategy onto innovation? I think these are all the things which needs mentorship, hand-holding, and things. So where I come from is my job is to look for good innovation, hunt good innovation, farm them, and take them to a level where it can be taken to, which can really lead to a societal impact. Correct. And then take it to a level where it can be used by the society to take it to. I think I will tell you a couple of examples during the discussion, but this is what to introduce myself. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Shirji. Rajesh, if you can broadly, of course, you have been involved with NII, then IGIB, and your involvement with actually putting together, taking science towards innovation, your efforts in terms of one of the very few academic entrepreneurs, to be honest, if I can put on my fingers in India right now in terms of trying to do cutting-edge science and taking that to the next level. If you can share your experiences, thoughts, and your work as well, that'll be good.
Sure. My congratulations to Wellcome Trust India Alliance as well. I mean, Shahid and we were amongst the early Wellcome Trust fellows, actually, and I think maybe we catalyzed this India Alliance. So sometimes we pat our back for, doing well as part of Wellcome Trust. But, what you say, I think it's, what I would like to share, is very interesting how innovation gets funded in variety of models even in India, actually. I mean, obviously the grants is the simplest form, I think, and an easiest way to get it with almost nothing attached to it. And so that's the easiest way to fund. It's kind of a push into the market. But what I've been able to do also is, for example, get funds from HHMI, which also has a different kind of character than Wellcome Trust actually functions. It's very individual specific, actually, and it just manages. And also then talk to venture capital guys, work with equity, how equity and debt ratios can be connected, and how one can, in fact, go and raise money from business angels as well in India. And I can tell you there are people whom you can approach and actually raise money to do these kind of stuff. Just to give you, a few hints that I probably work with, actually, when you want to raise money from all these different people. I mean, a couple of things very important to remember that I try to do from my own side. First to understand who is funding it. Who's going to fund? I mean, you need to pitch differently to different people, actually. The second is who will take the risk of paying money to you. When it's grants, it's very easy because it's governmental funds and you only have to do very simple things right, and then most of it can't go wrong, actually. But that's not the whole idea is. And the innovation, where is going to reach? Who is going to be the people taking it? So, for example, if you do this for a debt fund, and if you're going to raise some money for where you have to pay it back, you have to make sure that you have a mechanism to pay it back in a very rapid form, actually. And then how much the information is available with the funder. And that's something actually plays very, very crucial role for you to figure out how to approach your people, actually. Because, there are people who come from different kind of backgrounds. VCs actually don't necessarily know what you're talking about, but they have advisors who come and tell you to look at. So I think there are these different models that one needs to work around to raise money. Luckily, I've been able to do that in India, and substantial amount of it, and I think it makes huge amount of difference, actually.
Thank you so much, Rajesh, for that input. In terms of when you said that, talking about different models like HHMI, and as well as going out to business angels and who are possibly a bit more prone to supporting risk than the later stage funders. I think we'd like to come back to that as well, because that's something that I think the researchers need to understand as they go forward and push the risk ideas going forward. I think that would be something. I'll now request Manoj, who used to, if I'm not wrong, wear the tough hat of venture capitals, and funding at a larger level, and then moved in an avatar where I think he advises Tata Trust and leads Social Alpha, which engages in terms of building social impact innovations. And Social Alpha is doing phenomenally well. So if you can share your perspective, Manoj, on that.
Thank you. So what we are trying to do at Social Alpha is to create an ecosystem that brings science and technology innovators, entrepreneurs, investors, and various other stakeholders in the ecosystem together. Our focus continues to be on social impact, so we look at healthcare, education, water, sanitation, agriculture, and multiple spaces which are historically underserved by the venture capital or risk capital, and have always been funded through grants and public money. We search for entrepreneurs and innovators, and we provide them access to markets, access to capital, access to incubation ecosystem. For example, CCAMP is a partner, so we do a lot of work jointly with our partners, because, and wherever we see gaps, we try to build infrastructure. So for example, we just built an energy incubator in partnership with BIREC under Mission Innovation. So the whole idea is to create a pipeline of innovators and help them convert their innovations into successful startups. So we play the lab to market game in the sense that we try to provide innovators access to all those resources that help them create successful startups. And that is where the fundamental problem of capital in this sector comes in, which we can probably discuss at a later stage. But at this point of time, we see a good inventory of innovations, but I think a very small percentage of those innovations actually reach out to the communities for which they were originally funded or invented. So there's a gap, and that gap needs to be filled, and that's what the Charter of Social Alpha is. Absolutely. We'll come back.
Surely. No, thanks, Manoj, for bringing that aspect. I think one thing that we'd like to take on is I think you just mentioned as well before the session, is how do you possibly want to engage with technology innovators who are possibly doing phenomenal work but have not been able to cross a very small jump and do it to the next level. So that's one thing that we'd like to go for. Coming to Harish. Harish, you have been at Biocon, moved to Shanta Biotech, led Shanta Biotech, phenomenal success with Sanofi. And now you are heading as a senior advisor scientific programs at Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I think Gates Foundation has a different approach compared to many other charity organizations which directly fund research and so on. You have actually a lot of work that goes on to implementation of innovations as well, because a lot of things, while innovations are built, if they do not reach properly and you do not have the return as while the worth is for the innovations, I think that aspect, if you can just bring about in your introduction.
Thank you. First of all, congratulations on 10 years to the India Alliance. It's a wonderful achievement. It's been great to listen to the opening discussions. I would say that the foundation works on sort of 3 different levels. One is trying to get data to understand the problems, right? So a lot of money is actually spent on trying to get data. So for example, the global burden of disease. What causes death? What are the causes of death? That's an important thing to even advise policymakers to give evidence for the community as a whole. That is the key, first key aspect of it. The second aspect of it is that we have what are called program strategy teams that want to understand which of these problems is not being dealt with at the bottom of the pyramid, right? So we don't work, for example, in diabetes or typically in cancer, but we work more on prevention.
Indeed.
So vaccines, drugs, diagnostics that help people at the bottom of the pyramid. So that is the second. So first is data creation, understanding modeling data. Second is innovations, and there I will come to what the question you asked me. And the third aspect is trying to create partnerships globally, right? Which are, for example, TB Alliance or IRV or any of those things, participating in global partnerships. We have something called GHIT in Japan. We have something called the Right Fund in Korea that's recently been launched, where we are funding, along with companies and the government, development of new products, new research ideas, new pipelines. So if you take the question you asked me, so when we look at causes of childhood mortality, if diarrhea is a big one, right? So it comes out of research we are talking about. And let's say the #1 cause of death there is rotavirus vaccine, right? Rotavirus, and it's a vaccine preventable disease. How can we work to make sure that this vaccine is available at a low price to people, easily affordable, well affordable?
Indeed.
Make sure technology is available. So that's just one example. We work on HIV. We want to see what is the main driver for reducing mortality to HIV in the poorer parts of the world. So is that, for example, and what's the difference between doing this in the richer parts of the world and poorer parts of the world? Is it access to medication? Is it a long-acting formulation? What is it that is missing? Is it availability of the drug? Is it new drugs that need to be done? Is it new simple tests that need to be done? So there's a whole lot of things. I mean, I could speak for a long time on this.
Absolutely.
So trying to think of these kind of linkages. And also, very importantly, for any product we talk about, we want to understand upfront who is likely to fund procurement at the end. And we'll come to those kinds of things as well at the end. Because the commercial aspect of it is not just about investing upfront, but understanding how the market looks. So we sort of look holistically at the market.
Absolutely. No, thanks, Harish, for that. I think on this, we'll take the first, the QA break for now and see if we have immediate questions from the participants here. Based on the introductions from the panelists, do we have questions? Yeah, please go ahead if you have mic. Yeah, thank you.
So I'm Professor Abha Singh, Director Research Psychology, MIT University in Noida. I have a question to Dr. Harish. You spoke on prevention of disease and burden of disease on human resource. It's worldwide a problem. When I see as a psychologist, prevention of mental health is missing. And even WHO, yesterday we were in conference in Goa. WHO team was there. They are working on protocols to prevent mental health. So do you have any project, any future hope and scope for mental health prevention? Because India is ailing young generation, depression, suicide, and I can go on the list with statistic. So I would like to hear from you any strategy or anything on this area of concern. Thank you.
So I think that, so I think the foundation, so a couple of views on this, right? One is that the foundation itself today has focused on where it can have the maximum DALI impact, disability adjusted life year impact. And we have kind of said that this is, in the key areas, let's save young babies first, because let them get to grow old and perhaps consider mental illness as or aging, dementia and things like that as a potential problem. I must say that on the other hand, we know, this is public news, that Bill Gates' father, the trustee, he is suffering from Alzheimer's, right? And so there is a lot of interest in the family personally to understand this better, and I think they are working separately on some of those kinds of things and trying to connect, trying to see, understanding neural development, how is there a way to reverse it or slow it down, and absolutely, very crucially, the important things that you're referring to. At the foundation itself, we have not come to that. You could argue that some of the things we do may have some effect. For example, let's take pneumococcal vaccine that we work on. When you immunize children, one of the huge impacts it actually has on adult pneumonia, right? And these are things that are all risk factors to, worsening health, worsening mental health, depression, and many of those things. So there are some indirect impacts. I wouldn't say that we are doing anything right now, as far as I'm aware, of direct impact. But certainly, I think from the family perspective, it's very important. The other thing to say on this same front is, there are a lot of the rich countries are all growing old, right? There is a huge, huge desire in the rich world. And not in India, yes, India is still a young country, as we heard in the earlier panel as well. But in the rich world, when the US Senate has a lot of old white men who are going to have problems, mental health problems, you can be sure that mental health is going to be on the agenda all the time, right? Now, you're still asking the question, what about India? India is an important player in this. We surely have unique contributions to play. I think I would argue the same thing for the Indian Parliament. We're all aging. People who age need to worry about it. And, maybe, so it will be, I think, high on the agenda. So maybe our Gates Foundation is not needed for that particular problem. Maybe there are other societal factors that will drive research into that problem.
And I think I would say that absolutely prevention aspects of that would be very, very crucial, and I'm sure there will be other areas which will come up for that. There's a question right here. We'll take one more after that and then move on to the next aspect.
Thank you. My name is George Griffin. I'm from London, from the Academy of Medical Sciences and president of the European Academy of Medicine. Just with regard to vaccination, there are some really good things happening from Gates at the moment, and apropos of your comment on Rota, I was part of a very large study funded by Gates, and there is a big Gates program to help India produce Rota vaccine because the standards of the production were not FDA approvable at the time. I believe they now are, or almost, and they will be buying Rota vaccine for lots of countries where it is needed. The second comment relates to challenges that we have in Europe, which I hope do not happen in India, which is the anti-vaccination brigade. And this is getting strong. They are clearly influenced by fake news, to use that horrible word. Autism, of course, is the big one with MMR. So I would hope that in India, now that the vaccines are being manufactured very well here, there will be some vaccination strategy which is really robust.
Yeah. Harish, do you want to have a brief response? Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I completely. Do you have one more question before we move? So let me get back to the the original introductions, and I'll go to, considering Harish has been already picked on, I'll go to Manoj. Manoj, you mentioned the interest that Social Alpha has, and possibly the aim that you want to build the technology innovators or technology-led innovators come forward in terms of, and you want to fund those aspects. Would you be able to give a model that you are working on for this funding? And before I go on a funding model, I think I strongly believe that the IndiaAlliance model has really done well, and actually possibly giving a run for its money for other funding agencies to do well, because I think I'm happy to say that it is really creating a culture of excellence, which is very, very important anywhere. And I think keeping that culture up is the key, not necessarily spreading it all through thin. So so this is a model that is a one side of this, where it's doing fantastic work. In terms of your model, can you please tell us more about that from the perspective of your mandate?
See, what we are trying to do is to create a curation model.
Curation.
Right? So we search for new innovations and innovators, and use a network of our experts to evaluate and curate these into high impact innovations, and see if we can incubate them as a startup. The issue is, and which I think is not yet completely addressed in India, that taking an innovation from lab to market takes a lot of money and time.
Indeed, indeed.
It is not a game that you play with by giving 10 lakh rupees to 5 people, right? So you need to really develop expertise in identifying high impact, potentially scalable innovations, and put a lot of money behind them with a very clear understanding that you may lose all of that.
Sure.
Right? So anyone who desires to create an ecosystem for investing in deep science and technology startups must understand that the de-risking has not happened significantly at the idea to lab stage. Even during the lab to market, there is a significant amount of de-risking that needs to happen. And that you learn through iterations.
Absolutely.
So product development is not an RFP procurement driven process. It's a very iterative process where you work with your consumers and customers and users and build your solutions over a period of time that involves multiple pilots, validations, and that happens actually outside the lab, right? Now, if you are an innovator who also wants to be an entrepreneur, I think it's much, it's really simple. Then you innovate and then you move into the market. But that's an outline. Like I have seen maybe 1 or 2 such people who did it. Examples are there, like people who innovate and then actually take it to market and create an enterprise. A lot of times, you also need to identify people who can roll up the sleeves, are willing to take entrepreneurial risk, understand and have a flair for science and technology innovation, but have ability and intent to create co-founding teams with researchers, right? Allowing researchers to continue to do research while taking care of a lot of work that's required in solutioning and go-to-market. So this morning we announced a program called Entrepreneurs for Impact, just to create a pipeline of science and technology entrepreneurs who may not have really an IP or a patent, but have the willingness to work with people in co-founding teams who have IP and patents. And third is, if our curation model is really working and we can test it over a period of time, we should be able to allocate a significantly large amount of money to 1 or 2 really high impact disruptive innovations. If we don't do that, we have the risk of diluting and very socialistically distributing our R&D dollars to 20 projects, which could be suboptimal. So an ability and a desire to take significantly large number of risk on 1 or 2, and as your pockets become deeper, you can increase the number of companies you take bet on. I think that model has worked for us. So I have one example to quote. We have a scientist who quit his job in academia and built a company with us as an entrepreneur in residence, and now we are going through clinical trials. It's world's first liquid helium-free MRI machine that runs on a 1.5 Tesla magnet and does a full body scan. It's improved quality, improved speed, lower cost. I can actually put it on a truck. If everything works as per our plan, in 2 years down the line, we can actually mount it on a truck and take it to a primary health center and do scans there and transmit scans. But we are right now in clinical trials where we are validating the phantom images with the real image. But what I'm trying to say that this has taken 9 world-class engineers led by a world-class scientist who has option to create a career in science or technology to work for several years, right? And a commitment of almost 15 to 20 crore rupees before the product actually is ready to go into a manufacturing site, right?
Correct.
if we give a 20 lakh rupee grant and ask for 5,000 papers and 20 reports, and then repeat this exercise, we can't take this product from lab to market. So I think we should mentally tune ourselves that though there are two reasons. Number one, VCs don't play in this space. They are looking for much more matured and much more de-risk deals, right?
Correct.
So when you are in a stage between grant and venture funding, you need a new category of capital. And I basically assign 3 characteristics to this capital. Number one, this is extremely high risk capital. So its sources have to understand the risk they are taking. Number 2 is extremely patient. So your exit may not happen in 4 years, 20% IRR. It could be 12 to 15 years, or it could be perpetual. And third, despite taking an extraordinarily high amount of risk and a patience for long-term exit, you may still make suboptimal financial returns, right? So if you have willingness to live with these 3, difficult situations, then you can fund science and technology innovation and take it from lab to market. Now in this whole process, you may actually get a winner that can make multi-million-dollar returns and become a unicorn, but that's a pleasant outcome. That could not be the starting point of science and technology funding. So that's the idea that we try to sell to our funders. And what we want to do is to create an aggregation model where Social Alpha can be an aggregator of high-risk philanthropic and commercial capital and invest that capital into curated startups.
Absolutely. Thanks, Manoj. I think a very interesting approach, I must say, in terms of, attracting amazing science that is being done and supporting them through team building exercise to take them forward. I think I would just alter the possibly ever thought in terms of the structure and see if someone has a quick question for you, and then we'll go one by one. That will allow direct questions. Any questions? I think researchers are listening very carefully to what Manoj is saying in terms of funding. So can you please go ahead?
This is particularly with reference to Social Alpha, and I wanted to find out what are the, at what level is the funding being provided by Social Alpha? Am I audible? As like to individual researchers, young researchers, or there has to be already a lab or a well-established scientist? At what level it is being given? And what is the criteria of selection? I mean, do you like big grant competitions, or how is the selection basically being made?
So we don't do grant funding, we only do equity, but we do early stage equity when normal equity investors are not willing to do it, and we do it at very favorable terms to the startup. So basically we start when you are ready to start, right? Basically you have consumed all the grant funding from all the sources, but now there is a huge value of death, right? What happens, the small amount of money only shifts the value of death from April 2018 to March 2019. And you have the same problem, where do I get the... So we actually come in when you have a working prototype or a reasonable confidence on the solution, and you are ready to do the startup, and our funding is normally used for early stage solution development. For example, clinical validations, if we are talking about healthcare space, then validations go to market, and establishing product market fit. And that is where we bring in a lot of value in terms of our own entrepreneurial experience of our team, product management experience. We have very good expertise in product management, go-to-market, and de-risking startups. And that's where we help, and at some point of time, we think that we should be able to bring in the commercial or mainstream investors or impact investors, but they need a significantly de-risked business model to invest their money, because their investment horizon is 5 to 6 years, and their return expectation is much higher. So we actually play between the grant funding and investment. That's where. So early stage, we are always the first investors in the company.
I think that's kind of a music to the ear for people who are actually trying to identify funding for such a risky aspect, and I may just end up applying one day. But the other aspect that I wanted to come to Rajesh, who has actually done that aspect. Rajesh, one thing, let's say when I look at it from a CCAMP lens, I may end up saying phenomenal things in terms of happening. Like today, one of our startup actually shared a very, very exciting feedback from a neonatologist where they shared a picture where their device said that this baby of few hours, and I showed it to Manoj, would not have survived if it was not your device. And that is phenomenally fulfilling. It's a gratifying beyond a limit where you actually said that we have played a tiny, teeny part on that aspect, that the picture was really brilliant to say that something. But it's all like how high-end science you do. You do not want to create, the alikes of the innovations which are there. And for that, science is the base. We strongly believe, and at CCAM and otherwise as well, while a lot of things are happening, science has to be the base, strong base to actually have something disruptive coming up, something long-term, making knowledge economy that people talked about over the last 2 days and so on. But unfortunately, if I may say from my perspective, we are not seeing many academic entrepreneurs actually taking that leap of faith. There are not many rock star scientists who actually have come out the way it has happened to form Genentech, right? And there are no early signs as well, while there has been support. So where do you think, while you have done it, while you share your experience, if you can just reflect to say what possibly people can do better?
Well, this is almost always the most difficult question.
Sorry.
Why not? And but why something works. I mean, I really think it's all matter of confidence. Largely, researchers themselves have to have faith in what they have and what they have got and what they will be able to go where they will be able to go.
Fair.
Because they are the most right judgment at the end of the day. So that itself is, as of today, missing in India, actually. Very often we stumble upon, and there are plenty of problems of doing academic research as well, but still we are all sorting out how to do that. But very often we keep finding out where you all can get stuck. So that's one of the things. But the second part that Manoj very nicely put up is also who will do the initial round of funds. And I have been interestingly very lucky with finding people who are able to, whom I call, they are businessmen, but they're interested in putting some money, a little bit. They don't understand much about it, and you be friendly with them and be able to get some money. In fact, what is interesting in India at this stage, there are a lot of people who have a lot of money. It's really true. I mean, I know this. I've met many of them. It's not that many of them you can convince them to be able to get it to you, but many of them get enchanted by consumer market, which is again enormously high in India right now. I mean, if you put in money at that now, why would they put risk capital? And to be able to do that, folks like as Manoj talked about, that they probably facilitate. But I think we are not able to reach them because we are just not too confident about it, and they themselves don't have confidence that some of these will in fact materialize. Actually, I think there are very many well-meaning people. I mean, for example, if I tell you, cricket sports industry, if you take right now, it's become so big.
Correct.
That if you catch hold of a couple of cricketers who have so much of money from their IPL, you can in fact set up very many interesting models to look at in terms of doing it. So you need to chase them.
Correct.
Clearly, they're not going to come to you for sure. And that's one of our researcher problems. We are all very comfortable in what we can do. We are not very keen to do what we cannot do. And so from my perspective, the other perspective is they haven't seen it happening, right?
True.
So why would they come and agree to you what you are or what you have? So that's the time when you need to connect the emotional cord. And very often I realize, and that's how it works in US or most of the countries as well, that very often they have an example of, as Harish pointed out, in their family, somebody suffering from it, and they do a large donation for people doing it actually. So I think then you need to start scratching people who would have, so for example, leukoderma stuff or, for dermatological stuff when we try to look at, we try to search for people who would be able to do those kind of things actually. And I think it's really a good match. But I think the real challenge is walk out of your comfort zone and try to at least meet people. And in my opinion, that's the real bottleneck right now. It seems so simple with all the networking and all the amazing technologies that we use, but the connects are not that much actually. And that does limit anything.
No, thanks, Raj. So I think, very rightly said, I think we need more examples of champions who actually have done the other side of the aspect. Is there any question for Rajesh? I'm sure. I think Shahid has a question on that, and I think there was one more, but I'm sorry, I couldn't see her.
Very well said, Rajesh. Do scientists know how to write business plans? And is there an effort to teach scientists to write business plans? Or the elevator pitch, as you may say?
I totally agree. We have no idea what the business plan is, clearly. And that's where he said that people like them, they have consultants who can help you out on writing a business plan. But researcher can do a very good job, because at the end of the day, when we write a paper, we do in fact write a kind of a business plan that where the future research will go. You just have to convert into some end point. So I don't think we are we're very smart actually in rephrasing our papers and putting it together. What you miss is what are the exit strategies, or what are the kind of ways that one can actually move on and in fact be able to make money. But I don't know how your experience is. I have not, too many people if you are asking for a small kind of investment of 2 CR or 3 CR, people are not that bothered about, who have money or bothered about. They only talk about, are you going to do good things? Will it make difference to the world? And would it make difference to me if it happens so? And I think if these 3 answers you can convince them, I think many of them are in fact who have this large money with them, because rather than putting in a restaurant, they just put it into some place where it makes a little bit more fun for them actually. So it works like that. That's what I think. But you're right. I mean, business plan is a big challenge.
Yeah, I think you want to add something?
Just to add to this, for a scientist, I have not been a scientist, but I believe that for a scientist, I think it's also an opportunity cost, right? Do you really want to build a startup on your own and write the business plan, or you want to continuously create new, better, enhanced innovations, but have a company where you have stake, you have a skin in the game, where you are actually driving the science in that company and revalidating your research and the scientific progress in that company through its go-to-market strategy. You may be actually better off finding excellent co-founders who help you on all the other things. And there are people who want to be entrepreneurs in science and technology, but they don't understand the complexity of science, right? So I just came in the previous discussion, people were talking about collaboration. I think this is the most important part. Even in the commercial world, even in non-science startup, you see the most successful companies are companies who have excellent co-founding teams, right? So if I'm a scientist and I want to continuously focus on my innovation, I would get a couple of great operations people as my co-founders, not as my employees, not as, I quote this example of Larry and Sergey from Google. They were amazing engineers that they built Google, and they realized that if they want to continue to keep Google on the frontiers of digital revolution, they will not run it. So both of them hired their own CEO, right? And Eric Schmidt actually, first billionaire in America, who was not an entrepreneur, who actually became billionaire through his CEO position and stock he earned in Google, right? So some of the best innovators and engineers believe in letting go, bringing people in, but not as their employees, but as their partners and co-founders. The day you can do that, you will actually get rid of a lot of problems that you think are very complex.
Absolutely. Thanks, Manoj, for that. There's a question here.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Aman Gupta. I'm basically a clinician and a neuroscientist and a sleep medicine specialist. So this is a comment. I just wanted to mention here that when we talk about innovation, we talk about spending millions of dollars, right? I think innovation is also when you have already a technology, right? And when you use that technology in a smarter way for a newer indication. Why I'm citing this example is, so I have done that actually. And I have not spent even a single penny for that research. It has been a 300 subject clinical study, right? I was lucky to work in Harvard Medical School, get some training in functional MRI, and at Oxford to get some training in sleep medicine. So what we had tried to find out is my key interest is dementia, right? Globally, in US and UK, you have a good prevalence of dementia, right?
You may want to come to your comment
or
question.
Yeah, because it is linked.
Yeah.
Now, when I came back to India, I started to work or try to find out some funding for dementia research. Incidence of and prevalence of dementia in India is too low. Then I reconnected that dementia as a complication of diabetes. India is the diabetic capital of the world. Then the people were, investors were key. The point here is, whenever you are doing a research, you need to focus the marketing capacity of that particular research, right? Because I could link dementia with diabetes, and India has the largest population of diabetes in the globe. Now the investors are trying to help me out for funding. So this is, one comment. Second comment is, when we talk about mental health, what kind of funding opportunities are there in, mental health region? Yeah.
Thanks for your comment. I think the first aspect, if I may just briefly, with permission of panelists, I think is even for possibly, when you're proposing anything, you have to, as I think in the previous panel, somebody said that you need to understand whom you are seeking funding support from. And you have to align your work and implications and reference and relevance of work to that, be it a basic research, applied research, translation research, and so on. I think so it goes through everywhere. In terms of second aspect, I don't know if anyone has an answer for that. We do not have, unfortunately, a panelist to respond to that. So, but I'm sure that we can possibly share the message later on. Yeah, absolutely. I think there are several people who are doing it. Yeah. So then, if I would say, I think, but let me just go back to Rajesh's point. I think the most exciting part of convincing someone is the emotional connect, and I think be it an innovator, be it a funder, when you see the impact of what you have done is the most gratifying aspect, and I think that we have to do it more often, because just an example, if I may say so, a baby with some problems in respirations with a device where conventional device cannot help, and you can survive the baby, and the neonatologist write a note saying that your device helped, possibly makes not one day but many more years that you have been actually be able to do that. So that's important aspect for researchers to look at. Coming back to Shishendu-ji, I think, who has been working with Wellcome Trust, Gates Foundation, DBT, and BIRAC, and possibly he'll add much more as he goes on his project management unit. But as he used the word, and you did what you call it as innovation farming, how do you see a model where possibly, and it's an interesting model if you can share, where the four funding agencies have come together and set up the PMU itself, right, coming to the model itself. Where do you see, what was the thought process, if you can share, and what were the, the outcomes which possibly were not possible if they had gone alone?
I think,
yes, sir.
Thanks, Taslim. I think the idea, as I told you my opening thoughts, that it was not the funding only. The idea was bringing all the visionaries who established the PMU. We didn't thought of that the funding comes in from these four partners and we run a program or a grant scheme. But the idea was to learn from each funding agencies. We are really delighted that two largest philanthropies of the world are the partners.
Gates Foundation,
the government funding agency,
DBT,
partner. And so the idea was not to just get funding from all these sources, though everybody contributes equally into the program. But the idea was to learn good practices in terms of funding, in terms of grant managementship, also in terms of delivering the programs, managing innovations, taking the innovations to the next level, and next level, that is to create impact and to roll out the innovations. So innovations for impact, we call the program In India, for India, Beyond. There are various things we call about it. And the idea was to really take good innovations, and it was a very staggered innovation planning. We have exploratory models, and I can tell you examples also, how we have supported exploratory models. We announce, when these schemes announce, we have 20 themes, 30 themes. And then we farm, give them small amount of money. And a lady asked the question that what sort of funding is not a problem in India anymore. If you are an innovating funder, you're working in your lab, you are a faculty in your lab, big grant, you manage big grants. Right. you don't need to start a company. You can bring out a program for 18 months. If you are successful in 18 months, you are allowed for the follow-on round of funding. So your innovation goes to the next level. You get SIBRI or you get to our channels. Similarly, the Grand Challenge is exploration. If you're successful there, you are eligible for main Grand Challenges. Main Grand Challenges are successful, you are eligible for the scale-up grants. But you have to be successful. The innovation has to. My experience says that out of 100 innovations, we fund 5 innovations are successful.
Sure.
That is roughly, it might be 7 or 5, but roughly around that. But we need to de-risk innovation at every step, especially from the start to crossing the valley of death to take it to the further level. One question. So I call it always, and I tell my grantees that to win an award is to tell how compelling story you tell. It is just like, we used to hear fairy tales in our younger days. Our parents used to tell us. It starts with once upon a time and is to end with happily left ever after. So I think that should be the essence how you should structure your innovation. That this is the gap. I tell tears rolled down, it should come down from the funding committee's eyes. This is a compelling innovation. We need to fund it. And I can tell you an example.
Sure, please.
Actually, I also completed 10 years of my association with Wellcome Trust on 2nd of September. The Alliance was born on the 9th of September, and I joined on 2nd September 2008 in Wellcome Trust. So we used to do, Wellcome never used to put out any advert, and my job was to go to the labs, hunt for innovations, bring it to the funding committee. So I was doing outreach in IIT Delhi. And when I was doing an outreach, some gentleman from a computer science department sitting next to me, he said, "What is Wellcome Trust?" And I told him. He said, "I have innovation, which is, a cane which can, a smart cane, which I think they are showing 5 minutes there. We'll finish." So you have to, it can navigate. It can help visually challenged people to navigate. It's a smart cane. So it's a unique innovation. He said, and it was a very crude innovation at that time. But he said, "I'm running for funds, I'm not getting funds, is Wellcome interested?" I did some search, and the smart cane is an innovation which is not available in India at that time, and globally it was costing around $300. I went back to the trust, we built a story around that, but he was an academic innovator. He did a very good innovation, but what was the next steps? So then, you need to have, the innovation can't walk alone. They had filed a patent. So you need an industrial partner to take the innovation to the next level. Once the industrial partner is there, you need to have a validation partner who needs to validate it. And then it can go out in the field. And then, we connected to an industrial partner in Chennai. Then we talked to the National Association of Blinds to get the validation done. So a 360 story was built up. The innovator, the industrial partner, and the validator. And they all came together, and the innovation, and it went to the Wellcome's funding committee. Wellcome Funding Committee said that in India we didn't have a device regulation that time. So said people should not say that it is a low quality device we are bringing in. So give them X+1 money and get them a C certification done. So the quality standard is maintained. And I think 3 or 4 years back the cane was launched. I think as a funder, tears came down my eyes because people who got that cane said we didn't expect to get a smart cane at this cost. It is being sold at 2,600 rupees right now in India. From 200. So I think that story, compelling story, I think, and BIRAC has, every step of grants now to handhold them. Not only funding, we have a regulatory hub, we can guide them, IP hub. So I think we need to have a complete story and then the innovation.
Absolutely. No, thanks, Shirenji. In the interest of time, before I go to audience for last questions, I'll go to Shankar. Shankar, you mentioned your involvement in SAC. Yesterday, there was a form meeting as well. And you, at the same time, you shared involvement with Wellcome Trust, WTDBTIndiaAlliance. You also mentioned possible parallel, or the lack of parallel, if I may use the word, in terms of researchers coming together, making a case for strategic funding from the funding agency. From being from the SAC and seeing that while you are being at UCSD and NIH aspects, how do you see that happening here? Because possibly new funding models, are going forward, are needed. And I think, do you think that should be something more than conventional models looking at it? Can that be done like, possibly I'm putting ball in the court of DBT Wellcome Alliance here. Can those be the right models to fund those, to respond them earlier than otherwise?
Thank you. I'll be very, very succinct. So I see the clock running out. So there are 4 points, I think, which made U.S. science and translation and innovation to industry successful. Number one, I think they went into a team science model as opposed to individual R01 type. R01s are individual investigator grants. that the team science model has made dramatic difference in terms of bringing in innovation to the next stage. And I know that IndiaAlliance now is thinking about the team science model. The culture of team science has not existed strongly in India based on my observation, and I could be wrong about this, but I really think that this is the first step that needs to be done. The second step that needs to be done, which is a fundamental problem in science education in India, and I'm a product of science education in India, is that we are taught great theory. We know textbook stuff very well. We're not shown how to dabble in a laboratory or in a design kind of an environment where we are simply going to tinker around with things and come up with, that's where innovation begins at some level. And we're not taught how to do that. Is the government going to invest any funding in terms of bringing these kinds of things to, education in India at the college level and higher level? That's the second point, which is different. Yeah. The third point that's different is the one, we have incubators in practically every single major institution in India, educational institution in India. These incubators are the ones which allow people to do the bridge that you talked about. It's the bridge that you talked about. How do you take an idea from a simple point to a point of lab to a point of scale of production from beyond which you can go to the point that Shahid talked about, which is to make a business plan out of that. Yeah. So this incubation idea, why not have incubators in institutions, at least start with leading institutions, which could translate into, take an idea into intellectual property and then down to a business plan. And the very last point I want to make is a comment that I had with my colleague George Griffin, distinguished colleague George Griffin, made at lunchtime, which is that, we talk about biomedical sciences. We're keeping doctors and scientists being distinct and not connecting them in meaningful ways, and especially with the technological advances today, and the point that you made with reference to how technology made a difference to an infant who was born. I really think this bridge needs to be built, and if IndiaAlliance or other DBT or DST or ICMR or other institutions can help in terms of building this bridge, that'll help really push this frontier towards next generation science. And the more team science that exists in India, the more you can persuade the funding agencies to say that, look, we are successful because the sum is greater than the parts. The way to make the sum greater than the parts is for us to have bold, innovative ideas in funding models, which will help us go beyond. No, so I'll stop at this point.
Thanks, Shankar. So, coming from compelling stories from, innovations farming to kind of funds that the BARAC and the PMU support, to 4 points that you mentioned, team science, incubation centers, connect with the clinicians and the, the innovators and so on. I think with that, I would like to request 2 last questions from audience, if I may say so, and then we will possibly come to, are there any questions for Shishendu and Shankar from audience? There is a question right back. There's a question. So apparently this is only one question, so you are the lucky one.
Yeah, thanks. So I was wondering, keeping the balance between the basic science versus the translational science in the country like India, where we are not much ahead in science in comparison to the Western countries. So I was thinking, taking a step back, are we running fast in this case, or are we just shifting the balance the way we need it, or what should we be the balance right now in a country like India? Thank you.
Anyone from?
I think we are absolutely at the right pace. We are not running fast. Translational research in India, if you've seen, has grown in last decade only. Before that, we were all talking about big, strong. We have a strong base of basic science now, and we need to build on the translational. It's always nice to, when you start your basic work, you should think till the translational end, so that your basic science gets traction when it comes to a level and when it needs to be translated. I think we are running at the right speed right now.
Thank you. Manoj, you want to add something very quick?
I think one thing, if we could work towards adding to India's science and technology innovation ecosystem, is the availability of risk capital at early stage. I think we have a significant shortage there. The first seed capital, the institutional arrangement for seed capital, it needs to be improved further.
I think that's important. I think some part is being done, as we know, and I think more is to be done. If I may add, the pace, possibly we need to do a lot for a little to succeed.
And that's the spirit possibly we'll build with, because there is something, a huge vacuum in terms of what's happening. And something that we wanted to do, but I may just end with a food for thought instead of a discussion, is that we do a lot of science funding, we do a lot of innovation funding. Can we possibly do a very directed, how do we do a model for funding breakthrough research? I think with that food for thought, I'll thank the panelists to be here. Please join me to thank panelists for being here. Thank you so much, and I give the mic back to the organizer.
Thank you, Tasleem, and panel members, for a very thought-provoking discussion. There has been a minor change to the program. Before Dr. Jamil takes the stage, we will announce the winners of the Science Image competition. To present the awards, I invite on stage Professor Rafi Ahmed. He is director of the Vaccine Center at Emory University. But we at IndiaAlliance know him better as the chairman of our Strategic Advisory Council.
So very quickly, hello everyone. First of all, a big thank you to all our fellows who submitted for the Stories of Science image competition. A big thank you from my side. At IndiaAlliance, we're constantly exploring ways to make science and research more accessible. And dislike the stage. Yeah. This was also one of our efforts in that direction. So a big thank you to all the fellows for being such a sport and sharing their science image stories with us. I hope you all got to see them. They were in Jacaranda. I think they'll stay there for another half an hour after we finish here. So please do go and check them out. We had a very interesting and diverse judging panel that comprised of a cartoonist and a photographer, a science journalist, a mathematician turned photographer, who judged the science images, and here's the list. Here are the 5 winners. We were first planning to give 3 awards, but the competition was really fierce, and even though they felt that all of the images were fantastic, but to make things a little fun, we have 5 winners. So in no particular order, I'm just going to announce the names of the fellows who've got this award. Venkateshan Chakrapani at PGI Chandigarh. With his community agency, Sahodran, who works with for LGBTs in Chennai, and Venkateshan is not here, he had to catch a train, and he has requested me to donate his prize money to Sahodran. So we have it there. Our second winner is Dr. Lolitika Mandal from Mysore, Mohali. Please come. And our third winner, who's also here, is Srinivas Marmamula from LVPI Hyderabad. And our last 2 winners, who are unfortunately are not here, Dr. Pinky Kane from RCB Faridabad and Dr. Minhaj Sirajuddin from INSTEM Bangalore. We'll make sure their prizes reach them, and thank you all for being here. Oh, okay, sure. Thank you, Professor Ahmed. And very quickly, one last announcement from my side before I give it to Professor Ahmed. Can I have this presentation up, please? Not me, the people. So we're, along with Nature India, IndiaAlliance is launching India Science Media Fellowship for science journalists in India. This will be launched in December 2018. I'll be very happy to share more details with you today or by email, perhaps after this event. Do spread the word around. We need a good word of science to reach the public, and this is our effort in that direction. So thank you all for listening. And here you go.
Yeah, I just want to take a minute to thank actually the staff of India Alliance, and really have done a remarkable effort. And my colleague, Venkat Narayan, has a few words to say.
Thank you, Rafi, and good evening, everybody. On behalf of all the committee members of all the India Alliance committees, it is my privilege to thank and honor a person for a tremendous show of leadership done with a sense of great humility, with a sense of great pride, vision, very self-effacing, but always listening to new ideas, showing open-mindedness, and a great commitment to science and development of young people and science infrastructure in India. Hardly surprising, because this person comes from a pedigree of people in India who have dedicated themselves to science. His grandfather was a vice-chancellor of a major national university. Father was an extremely famous professor, somebody who withheld the importance of science and science integrity. A mother who was also an academic. So my thanks and our thanks to Dr. Shahid Jamil for his fantastic leadership. And Shahid, thank you for your tremendous integrity above everything else. Thank you very much. Thank you. The chairs and members of the India Alliance scientific community thank Dr. Shahid Jamil, PhD, Chief Executive Officer, the Wellcome Trust DBT India Alliance, for being a leader who made a difference. Thank you.
My slides.
What do you use this one?
Huh. Yeah. You read this. Good evening. Can you hear me? Okay, all good things must come to an end. So I stand before you to talk about the future of India Alliance. So before I do that, let me go through a few things about the program, because that builds up what we plan to do in future. We pride ourselves in funding excellence, and when we talk about excellence, we talk about people and their ideas. I don't expect you to read this. This is already in the program brochure. Please look at it. This is just to remind you to look at it and look at our journey. We fund 3 kinds of fellowships: early fellowships to launch careers, intermediate fellowships for people to establish themselves, and senior fellowships to nucleate important ideas. And we fund in two different streams, basic science stream and clinical and public health stream. Over the past 10 years, really 9.5 years, the data I'm giving you is till May 2018. We will select a few more fellows in the next 3 days. We've so far awarded 320 fellowships at 93 institutions in 34 Indian cities. These 10 years have been impactful, and again, all this is in your program brochure. This is just to remind you and request you to have a look at it. I'm particularly proud of a few things. One is that we were the first in the country to establish a fully online grants management system. And this happened before I got there, so all the credit goes to the people who conceived of this and set it up. Also, we have really facilitated brain gain for India. And a recent survey done by the Wellcome Trust independently showed that 83% of our fellows would continue to work in India after the fellowship is over. We also improved the scientific breadth in the country, and our fellows receive world-class recognition. I will come to that. And also publish very important papers, and I'll come to that as well. There has been a ripple effect of these fellowships, and the ripple effect really has been that besides the fellowships that we give, there are people who train in our fellows' labs, PhD students, postdocs, technicians, and that number is almost 1,000 by now. Through our public engagement program, science communication workshops, we have trained over 2,500 young PhD students, postdocs, MDs. We take leadership issues very seriously, and therefore we conduct leadership workshops, and although the numbers are small at this point, only about 100 or so, we really want to build up on this. Gender challenges are there in India, and I'll come back to that, how we are addressing that. We really want to make science accessible, and we do a lot of public engagement activity to ensure that. And we also want to move towards better research management and assessment practices, and for that reason we started a program this year which is called the India Research Management Initiative, IRMI, and more of that will follow. So as I said, we've given 320 awards. You will see that 80% of our awards are going to people who are early in their career. 30% to early career fellows, about 50% to intermediate fellows. So we really like to fund people early in their careers. And we have a pan-India distribution. As I said, many institutions across many cities. This is important. And this is a slide that Siddharth Jhunjhunwala, who's an assistant professor at ISC Bangalore, gave to me. Siddharth did an estimation of what it requires for a young faculty member to set up a lab in US compared to in India. And his estimates are it takes about 5 crores to set up a lab outside India. In India, it takes about 1 crore to set up a lab. But from our perspective, his next slide is very interesting. What he has calculated is the amount of money given per grant in an NIH grant to an early investigator, in an NIH grant, an NSF grant, a DBT, DST grant, or an IndiaAlliance grant. And the interesting thing is that we are funding our fellows in India at the same level that NIH funds early investigators in US. And if you exclude salaries, which make a large part of NIH grants, we're actually funding people much better for their work and their supplies compared to an NIH grant. So we really want to fund people well, because when you select the best people, you need to fund them well and fund them on time and nurture them well. Our impact, and again this is external assessment done by the Impact and Analysis Group at Wellcome Trust. They do surveys that they send out. They search PubMed to see who's publishing what. And they have done something called the relative citation ratio of our fellows compared to others who are doing biomedical research in India, and compared that to biomedical researchers in the UK. An RCR of 1 means that that person is publishing at a global average. Anything above that, you're publishing better than global average. Anything lower than that, you're publishing lower than global average. The relative citation ratio of IndiaAlliance fellows is 1.5. They're publishing 50% better than their peers elsewhere. The relative citation ratio of UK medical research is 1.39, almost the same. The RCR for Indian medical research is 0.6. So our fellows are doing very well. Guys, you're doing well, but you need to do better. Our impact is also in maintaining gender equity. We are not there yet, we are getting there. 33% of IndiaAlliance fellows are women. Like elsewhere, we have a leaky pipeline too. Our early career fellowships, 52% are women. But when it goes down to senior fellowships, only about 10% are women. We work in the same ecosystem. So what are we doing to address this problem? What we are doing is to consider non-research career breaks, including maternity break, when we look at the eligibility of people who apply for our fellowship. And once you have our fellowship, if one of our fellows goes on maternity leave, she gets a 1-year full cost extension on her fellowship to enable her to come back into research with full gusto. The other impact is in the awards that our fellows are getting. So at this point, we have among our fellows 3 Infosys Prize winners, 1 announced just yesterday, 7 Bhatnagar awardees, 2 EMBO Young Investigator Awards, and mind you, these are the only 2 Indians who have been given EMBO Young Investigator Awards, 1 HHMI International Research Award, again, the only Indian to get that award, 1 Royal Society for Tropical Medicine and Hygiene Emerging Leader Award, again, the only Indian, and many fellowships to India's science academies. So again, guys, you're doing well, but I need to see more numbers up there. Okay, so I was supposed to talk about the future. What does the future hold for us? What are we planning for the future? Well, for the last 10 years, we've been funded very well by both Government of India through DBT and the Wellcome Trust. And for the last 10 years, they have given, or there was an intent to give, £80 million from each partner. The intent in the next 5 years is for DBT to double its funding and Wellcome to maintain its funding at the same level. So essentially, we are looking at about 50% more money in the next 5 years than we had in the last 5 years. So what are we planning to do with that money? Well, as far as programs are concerned, I think the fellowships will continue because fellowships are our strength and you don't give up on your strength. And this is, somebody advised us in the previous panel that you should continue with your strength. So we will continue with the basic as well as the clinical and public health fellowships. We will continue with the 3 levels, the early, intermediate, and senior fellowship. We will also bring team science now. And this is something that I think Shankar talked about, and others have also been talking about it. The key thing about team science is this will not be available to people to do their next experiment. This will be multidisciplinary, multi-institutional, and the focus will be to do things that will solve important health challenges for India. Be accountable. We also want to strengthen clinical research by setting up clinical research centers, and these are going to be virtual centers, and I'll talk a little more about it. The idea is to develop physician scientists for the country and also to strengthen clinical research. So what really are the health challenges for India? And every challenge brings an opportunity, so what are the opportunities? And I cite you some data which was published recently in Lancet and under the Global Burden of Disease. And this is a program that estimated disease all the way from 1990 to 2016. That's a fairly good measure of what ails our population. Heart disease is the leading cause of disease burden, and contribution of cardiovascular disease to the overall disease burden has doubled between 1990 and 2016. Indians with diabetes have gone from 26 million in 1990 to 65 million in 2016. The incidence of cancer is up 28% between that period, and as you heard Sir Boris talk about it this morning, it is expected to go up by another 65% by 2035. Air pollution, those of you who are in Delhi this week know this. Those who live in Delhi live through it every day. Air pollution, lung disease patients increased from 28 million in 1990 to 65 million in 2016, and it is estimated that if you're living in an Indian city with air pollution, your lifespan, average lifespan, goes down by 1.5 years. So those of us who live in Delhi, I think don't delay writing your will. Do it now before it's too late. Mental health, it has been mentioned. Suicide is the leading cause of death in 15 to 39-year-olds in the country. Infectious disease, there remains a high incidence. There's a lot of zoonotic infections that are propping up. India is a hot spot for zoonotic disease. Antimicrobial resistance is increasing. And of course, you already know about maternal and child health issues, stunting, wasting, and many more. So we have many challenges. I'm not saying that we will fund only in areas that are on this slide, but these are health challenges that people should be thinking about. As an example, let me talk about artificial intelligence in disease and health. And there is a disclaimer that this is only for the purposes of illustration. You should not go back thinking that we are going to fund any project that comes through on artificial intelligence. Sometimes natural stupidity is as important as artificial intelligence. So as you know, medical knowledge is expanding. Decision making is becoming increasingly complex. Patients are getting older with many comorbidities. More testing is happening, more medications, and increasing health records. Every patient is now a walking big data challenge. Are we addressing it enough in the country? That's the question. Clinical records are also the result of human decision making. What doctor you go to see, what tests does he order, what medications does he order. And therefore, algorithms that learn from human decisions will also learn to make human mistakes. So one needs to be wary about that. Everything that comes through the big data challenge or artificial intelligence should not be taken as gospel truth. Clinical acumen is equally important. So for example, big data analysis of health records, electronic health records, have recently shown 3 subtypes of type 2 diabetes, and each has its own biological signature and disease trajectory. What's going on in Indian patients? What subtypes? The our polymorphisms are different, our genetic makeup is different. Do we know? So these are important questions to ask. Artificial intelligence and cancer pathology, Sir Boris talked about it this morning briefly. And there are many more. Okay, let's come to clinical research centers. The aim of the clinical research centers is really to develop physician scientists and to strengthen clinical research. And there are multiple ways of doing this. We are not going to be prescriptive on how this is to be attempted. We would like people who apply for these clinical research centers to suggest how they will achieve this aim of developing physician scientists and strengthening clinical research. The CRCs would be virtual centers. No money would be given to build offices or labs. No brick and mortar money. Money will be given for ideas and for people to come together. To bringing medical schools and hospitals together with universities, basic science institutes, engineering institutes, to again solve important health challenges. And these would be both cross-cutting as well as vertical. As examples of this, for example, a cross-cutting CRC could be something that deals with big data in health, or something that is focused on disease modeling across a number of diseases. A vertical CRC could be something that's focused only on AMR, or on nutrition, mental health, respiratory infections, environmental health, you name it. There is also thinking that these centers should have some capability for study design. We can either fund that, or we could take help from others who are already in this domain. And finally, these clinical research centers would also have a clinical research training program, and this training program could be used to train physicians in basic science, get them to do research, give them a fellowship to have protected time away from the clinic to do research. So many models, and again, as I said, we would not like to be prescriptive, but follow that aim which is there on the first line. There are other foolishly ambitious thoughts that we have, but those are for the longer term. Can India Alliance go regional? Should it remain focused on India, or should it also start working in the region? Nothing stops us from getting researchers from Bangladesh or Nepal or Sri Lanka, and God forbid even Pakistan, to apply for our fellowships and work at Indian institutions. Nothing stops us. Can we be more ambitious and look at it that way? What are the future models of funding? I mean, the last session talked about philanthropic funding, corporate fund, social responsibility. Rajesh has many friends who are willing to give money, 1 or 2 crores, just if you can just convince them. So we should really be thinking about those things for the future. And can India Alliance really be a one-stop shop whose mantra is to provide good research management for funders who want to come and fund research in India? And one example of that, which is going to happen very soon, is the Cancer Research UK DBT partnership, which we are being asked to manage, just like we are managing this partnership between the Wellcome Trust and DBT. So to end, now we are funding fellowships, and in fellowships we are funding the best people. We are also empowering people, and we are bridging gaps, all kinds of gaps, gaps between basic science and clinical science, gaps between science and society, and we will continue to do that in future as well. So we will do all that in future, plus work towards solving health challenges for India. And that's really going to be the next big thing that we would like to do. So I would like to end by thanking our funders, DBT and Wellcome. The money is useful. Money is always useful. But the guidance and the advice and the oversight that our funders provide us is really very precious to us. Our committee members, you advise us, you give us your valuable time, to select the right people. And of course our fellows, because they are eventually the people who make us look good, and we are really, really, really proud of you. And finally, the staff at India Alliance, I am really privileged to work with a very fine bunch of people. So really thank you all very much. That's it. Thank you. I'm told there is some tea outside.